We're going to have a short time for questions. It'll be the usual rules. Give your affiliation and your name before you ask your question. There will be a mic around, I hope. And if you've got questions for Johan, could you start with those, please, because he has a plane to catch and he might just need to run out on us any minute. So if there's a question about the Swansea Lagoon project, anyone? Anyway, try and do it before he runs if you think of something. So just opening it up to any other questions that you might have.
Hi, Colin Pearce from Holder, and it is about the Swansea Lagoon. Looks fantastic, by the way. Just wondering how close you are to finance. That's always a big bugbear on all these things.
Well, development finance, 15 million. We'll probably nail that by next month. In terms of if that's 850, then we're confident that we've already got that money, not in the bank, but committed.
Is that what you wanted to know? Good. Any others on, still on Swansea Bay? No? So a lot of what you've seen this afternoon looks quite different to single turbines sitting on a base in the bottom of the sea, doesn't it? I wonder if that stimulates any thoughts in anyone's mind. Any questions then, please? Right up back here.
Thank you. My name is Kate MacDonald from Capella IP. This is a question for the other Kate, McWilliam, I think, from Carbon Trust. About your marine farm accelerator, you talked about how that was modelled on the offshore wind accelerator, and I realise it's very early days for the marine farm accelerator, but I wonder if you have any comment on how the knowledge that you're acquiring is through those projects is first of all going to be documented, consolidated, and then shared, and where, because I'm an IP attorney, where it's going to be owned.
Yeah, sure. I think we're keen within the MFA to perhaps improve on some of the maybe perception around the OWA that some of the information wasn't disseminated perhaps as widely as it could have been. So what we're really keen to do is try to disseminate as much information as we can. The mechanisms of doing that, I don't think we've worked out quite yet, but it will definitely be our default to share where we can, but of course we would always protect the IP of the innovator. But by default we'll be trying to share what we can within the restraints we've got. Is that okay?
All right. Another question. Down the middle. Thank you.
Hi, this is Matthew Blair, J&S. It was a question, I think, for John Armstrong. I think you made a comment about running cables back to shore rather than just one cable and hub. I was wondering whether that was technical, risk, financial, what the reasoning behind was that approach. And the fact you mentioned, I think, the SSE were involved with this, so it was whether or not there was an SSE angle in this as well.
Just let me check I got the question. It's about the running a cable to shore from each of the turbines rather than having any sort of collection device. I think it's the cost of the permitting of a subsea, of an offshore platform to gather energy is quite difficult, and to make that survive. And if you can run the cables directly to shore from the units, then that's better. On the other hand, of course, there's an implication of each cable coming to shore, permitting needed for that, and the cost, and so it's a balance of those two things. How many can you run a number of cables to shore versus do you have to build an offshore platform? So that it's a balance that SSE says they're interested in.
Do you have any other questions on that theme or some other? While you're thinking, I'd like to ask the panel to comment on a question. I felt at this equivalent occasion last year, the atmosphere was somewhat doom-laden. Do you see the atmosphere lightening or darkening right now? I wonder, Ray, maybe you want to kick off from your overview situation.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate what I said, John, and that was, well, the backdrop could be better, just in terms of where the whole renewable space is right now. With the inversion of the market, there's contraction all over the place, and that does inevitably impact upon the risks that people are prepared to take in the riskier end of the market. And right now, marine, tidal are the riskier end of the market. But despite that, I'm probably more confident now than I have ever been that tidal will succeed. A couple of years ago, I would say the jury was very much still out, but there will be consolidation, there will be casualties along the way, but there will be an industry. Tidal head and tidal flow will both be commercially viable industries in the very foreseeable future. So I'm despite appearances, really quite optimistic.
Mark, have you got a view on this?
Yeah, we're optimistic. We feel we've got the technology that is going to be cost-effective enough to succeed. Ray talked about a process of Darwinism to come in the sector, and to survive in the jungle, you either have to be very fit or very strong or very fast. We like to think we're at the right end of the scale for that. I agree. I think there will be a process of consolidation. There will be some that will fall away over the next few years, but it's a natural process that occurs in any industry. And yeah, we're certainly confident that we've got a solution that is cost-effective and reliable, and that very soon will have a level of risk that will be acceptable to those that have the finances to fund projects.
Coming along the road, John, do you have a view?
Well, Mark has always said the future is floating, I think. So I think that the future for floaters and semi-floaters like ourselves is bright. Maybe the future for those who are fixed to the seabed is more questionable.
Graham, from a technology improvement point of view, what's your take on all this? Do you think technology's got a lot to offer at the moment?
Well, I wasn't here last year, so I can't comment on the various grades of doom. But there are a lot of things that you can do to mitigate the risk and demonstrate the risks are lower. My background is not renewables as such, but it covers a wide range of submarines and nuclear power stations and all kinds of things where you do take a lot of effort to de-risk what you're doing up front, and you can use a lot of techniques to really understand how your system is going to behave. So I think it allows you to put numbers and costs and probabilities on the risks and uncertainties that are out there, and that probably helps with finance. So the level of uncertainty does set your cost of finance to a large degree. So there's certainly ways that you can help bring that down by a bit of clever thinking.
Kate, would you like to make a comment from the perspective of the Carbon Trust, who've been in this game quite a long time? But how do you see the sort of levels of optimism and so forth?
Yeah, I'll caveat this slightly. I've been with the Carbon Trust for about 9 months, and unfortunately haven't come from renewables, but I can certainly comment on what I've seen within the Marine Farm Accelerator. And I think it's quite a balanced view. I think people are well aware of what the difficulties are, but there is still optimism, and we see that coming through in the meetings that we have. So from an individual's point of view, I think it's quite optimistic, and people are still keen to push on.
Well, from that I detect quite a lightening of the mood. We've still got time for a question. Is there anybody else been stimulated to think of something out there? Gentleman in the middle.
Hi, Colin Pearce from Holder again, as no one else is taking the floor. Just a quick comment. I mean, rather than marine dedicated in terms of tidal, but there's also offshore wind as well. And the comparison that you used, Mark, with onshore wind was interesting, but there's lies, and then damn statistics. The comparison with offshore wind would have been a more sensible comparison, and offshore wind has actually gone up recently rather than down in terms of the LCOE. So that's an interesting comparison. But in terms of the market, the government doesn't seem to be as committed to renewables as it was the greenest ever government going to be. It's certainly not that now, and it seems to be more putting its eggs in the nuclear and shale gas side of things. So all of that's just a comment. Quick question for Kate, totally different. We've been involved in the OWA, which has been a good process, but that's been with the backing of the 9 companies. What the backing you hinted at was from government subsidies and funds. How much money is going to be available, and what's sort of going to be the level of funding available for specific projects?
Sure. So we've secured Scottish Government funding of £3 million. And that will go into the pot to be match funded. And there's obviously the 2 ways of doing that, through the common projects and the discretionary projects. And I think whilst the OWA has sort of always stated, I think it's 33% funding in terms of state aid, what we're likely to do, especially with discretionary projects, is almost do it on a case-by-case basis in terms of the amount of state aid that we can provide per project. So we're aiming for 50% for the MFA.
Yeah, I don't know if Mark, did you want to come back on the onshore-offshore wind comparison?
Yeah, no, I take the point. If I was to put up a graph of the cost development in offshore wind, we would have seen it go up over the last few years. A lot of the reasons for that are that offshore wind is being pushed further and further out into deeper water, and that is some of the main reasons why the costs have gone up. We're now seeing the progression of floating offshore wind, which I guess brings us back to why we're doing floating, because we feel that that's the best way to go for this sector. To comment on the question of government support, I've been doing this for 10 years now, and I mean, there's been a lot of, we've had a good amount of government support. To a large extent, it's kind of a drip feeding process, which is understandable. I think for Tidal to make an impact and get a real commitment from government in terms of support, we need to be getting to a strategic level where we can make very significant impacts on our energy mix. But that's not going to happen until first arrays go in the water, and ultimately until the risk comes down to a level that is going to be acceptable to people, not just the private sector, not just the utilities, but to government as well. I think we will see the support from government, but not until the risks are acceptable.
Good. Thank you very much. I think we said this morning at the session that Janine Kellett was chairing that one of the things we do need to see out of government is a consistent support for low carbon and no carbon renewables. Whether or not they put vast amounts of money in, it would be very nice to see that consistency of push, rather than saying, oh, we can save the consumer £1 a week by getting rid of these nasty green taxes. I think we'd all welcome a more positive approach from government, and we should all push for that as part of our effort. So we've come to the end of the session. I'd like to thank you, the audience, for coming, and particularly resisting the blandishments of Richard Branson. And I'd like to invite you to thank the panel in the usual way, please. Thank you very much indeed. For those of you thinking about heading off, safe journeys, and remember not to come here next year. It's a different time and it's a different place. Thank you. Good afternoon.